what? A 90mm macro? I've only just done a review of the 60mm. Roll titles. Oh, hi YouTube, Brian James, that Micro Four Thirds guy with you once again. And it seems no sooner have I done a review on the 60mm f2.8 macro lens from Olympus, or OMDS, which fabulous little lens that is, really is impressive. Then I see that they're releasing the 90mm f3.5 Pro macro lens. That's going to be stunning, I think. Now, it's been released, I know that it's listed on B&H in the States at the moment, so it is definitely coming. There is a special announcement coming very soon from OMDS, so I'm presuming there's going to be that. They also had a whole lot of firmware updates. If you haven't done your firmware updates on your cameras, please get them done now. It's mainly for this lens, but it's also worth keeping up to date on the firmware updates. And if you look in the description below, you'll find there's a direct link straight to the Olympus site to find out what updates are available for your camera and lenses. But if you've got anything further, anything newer than an EM1 Mark II, for instance, you'll find there's an update for this 90mm f3.5 Pro series macro. Some of which you can do. It is possible to do the updates on via tablet or mobile phone if you've got certain cameras. The EM1 Mark II doesn't, but all the cameras which have got the updates can be done through the OiShare software, either on the tablets or on the on your desktop, whether it be a PC or a Mac. And as I say, just plug them in. Make sure you got a fully charged battery and lots of space on your SD card that's in there. But it's worth getting those updates done. As I say, there is a link straight below in the comments, in the description below this particular video. They really are moving forward, I think, now. I know that I had a go at OMDS after the OM5, and it was nothing to do with the camera itself. It was to do with poor marketing. Well, hopefully, I think they've got it right this time, from what I can see coming up. They seem to have the lenses ready, or at least ready to be listed on the dealers' pages, and it seems a really good lens and a really good product to come forward. A big step. This isn't just a revamp of something else. Currently, the biggest macro lens that Olympus do is that 60mm that I was on about before. This is a Pro Series lens. It's got IP53 splash and dust-proof protection. It's got inbuilt optical image stabilization, which again is fabulous. A 2:1 magnification rate, and equivalent of course to a 180mm lens on full frame. This is a long lens. Ignore the macro part for a second. Just using this as a straightforward 180mm prime, or 180mm equivalent prime at f3.5, this is a good bit of kit. You know, it's I don't know how big it's going to be. I've got no specifications on that, but it's not going to be silly huge. This is going to be a really usable 180mm lens in its own right, I believe. But with being a macro, it's giving you all the advantages of that macro. And you'll know from the last video which I did about the 60mm, if you look, there's a link above to that one. You'll know that I'm not a macro photographer, but I thoroughly enjoyed myself taking some of those photographs with the 60mm in a macro way. If you remember on that video that I did, I said about the fact that, you know, with a 60mm lens, it's getting you to the point where you were close, but not so close that you're going to spook things like small animals and insects and things like that if you're taking photographs of something live and moving. Well, being a 180, an extra 30mm focal length, being a 90mm, an extra 30mm focal length over the 60, you know, half as much again, you can be that much further away and still have the same amount of magnification. And that again is going to give big advantages so as not to spook the animals or the insects that you're trying to photograph. Alternatively, it lets you get that much closer in so your magnification factor is even bigger. This is going to be a major game changer, I think, when it comes to Micro Four Thirds and macro lenses. And as I said in the last video, I did have somebody on one of the social media pages really go to town about you know, about the advantages and disadvantages of it. It was quite an in-depth conversation I had with somebody. But basically, the advantage, as far as I'm concerned, on Micro Four Thirds is we have the ability to get that a little bit of extra depth of field for the same aperture on the lens compared to our full frame brother. So it's going to give an even better chance of being able to use that depth of field. Now, one thing I didn't do with the 60mm lens was to actually start using focus stacking. And again, this thing will be able to use focus stacking with the cameras which can take it equally as well. So this is going to be something of a game changer. And it is one of the Pro Series lenses. And one thing I can say about the OMDS lenses is they are beautifully made. The Pro Series lenses are magnificently made, and they are fantastic optically. And if this one is anything short of that, I will be absolutely stunned. I'll be amazed at that one. So really looking forward to see what happens on that, to see what it's like. So what else has been happening in the way of in the way of the photography world? Well, as I said, we do have the firmware updates for the Olympus, and there's also a firmware update for the 300mm from Olympus. So it's worth, if you got that lens again, get onto the OI Share app, put it in camera, and get that firmware update done on it. But there's also been a couple of exciting things coming from Lumix. First of all is the fact that they seem to have a big emphasis going on to the idea that Micro Four Thirds has a very rosy future, and is a direction they're going to not only go in but support heavily. And I'm really pleased about that. I saw that on one of the rumour sites from Lumix themselves, where they're saying that Micro Four Thirds will be particularly popular amongst the younger people as the future rolls on. And I think that's quite a serious viewpoint on it. I think it is very important that we get that into our heads. I think Micro Four Thirds as a format is great. It's the real logical next step from using a mobile phone. And I know a lot of people are taking photographs on mobile phones more and more these days. But there's an awful large amount of people who actually want something that little step further from a mobile phone. They want something better quality with interchangeable lenses and a bigger sensor and ability to do more creative work with it. Not just from an AI point of view, but from themselves, where they can do more creative work. And I've always been a big advocate of Micro Four Thirds, but it sounds like Lumix are really realising that the young generation is going to take over and probably going to be going towards Micro Four Thirds rather than other camera formats, to whet their appetite, to fill their needs in the photographic line. I think this really is important news. They're saying in the article that they see that there's a need for small, lightweight cameras to replace the mobile phone, and I think that, you know, I do think that is a positive move from Lumix, because one of the things I've seen is, a little bit like myself, the girth of cameras has been increasing. When we get onto something like the GH6, it's a beautiful camera, absolutely fabulous camera, but it makes the rather large GH5 and GH5 Mark II seem quite slimline. Now, we seem to have been going up and up in the sizes. I've talked about my G9, which I absolutely adore, but the G9, well, you can get full-frame camera bodies, which are no different in size to that. In fact, you can get actually smaller full-frame camera bodies than the G9. So they're becoming very portly, very large, and they've needed to be able to cram all the extra electronics in, to get all the fantastic features they have. But times are changing a little bit, and I think the market is changing as to what's required. So I'm really, really pleased to see that Panasonic Lumix are really taking their steps in this direction and recognising not only that the full frame L-mount lenses are important to them, but also realising that the Micro Four Thirds system is equally important and for a different sector of the market altogether. I did a video recently about my ideal camera, and it's quite interesting. I did that, I think it was just after Christmas, and I think people must watch my videos. I think people must watch my videos, because within a few days, some of my favourite YouTubers on here who deal Micro Four Thirds doing a very, very similar video themselves as to what they'd like to see and what it was, and how they'd like it to be progressed in the Micro Four Thirds world, what features they wanted and how they wanted implemented. And I had something of a smug feeling inside that I'd got there first. But the one thing I did find out from them all, and if you are one of those YouTubers and you are watching this, then I say that in the nicest possible way, because if I'm watching your videos, it means I like what you do as well. But almost all of them mentioned things like the GX8. The GX8 as a format, without having the false pentaprism on the top and more the rangefinder looks, but a camera which had some substance to it, but didn't necessarily have all the fancy features. And I know we seem to be led by all these features. We seem to go down that route of having to have all these fancy features. But in reality, how many of us actually use the more outlandish features on the cameras? In fact, how many of us really use any of the fancy features? We use our autofocus. We use, we like to have the far better ISO performance and things. A lot of us are leaving it on auto ISO, which I tend to do, I must admit. And on some of my cameras, I've edged up that little ISO a little bit further than I would have normally and still getting fantastic results. But some of the real unusual features tend to be more in the specialist line. And the idea of something like a GX8, but with newer sensor technology, better IBIS in it compared to what we had, because I mean that was the first of the 20 megapixel Lumix cameras. But to have that and maybe phase detect come into it, and to have some of those really good advantages that we've got on the modern cameras, but not necessarily the more obscure features, I think that would be a fantastic camera, and I think it would sell extremely well. And looking at some of those other YouTubers who put out these videos, almost every one of them mentions a GX8 somewhere amongst them as in a very favourable light as being somewhere getting close to the idealised camera for future sales. So what do you think? Again, let me know in the comments below on that one. Now also, just before we do leave this, a thing about the cameras themselves. Your San from Panasonic has said that phase detect will be coming to Micro Four Thirds. So I mean, this is what was said in the S5 Mark II video which I did recently, and again there's a link above to that one, where I was hoping it would come. It sounds like Panasonic, now they've got this technology under the belt, are really going to start pushing it through, and I really would be interested to see what happens from that and where it goes. My money, first of all, will be probably a GH6 Mark II, and I think the GH6 Mark II with the phase detect might be the way forward. It is a bigger body, it's capable of taking a lot more in there, I think, which for development, and it's also, with its video-centric priority, if you like, I think it's going to be somewhere where phase detect is called for the most. But I can see it's slipping down through the range, and I'd love to see something, as I say, a GX8 Mark II, or a G9 Mark II, whatever they want to call it. I'm just using these as the next generation. But I think that would be a really good introduction from there. And it's good to see development work in the Micro Four Thirds line. Really impressed to see that. Now finally, before I finish on this news roundup, again on the rumour side of things, looking at what's coming out, it sounds like Panasonic have announced a hyperspherical sensor. And it's supposed to have the world's highest sensitivity. This, I've got to read all the tech specs on it and think. There's a whole page on my iPad which I'm glancing at here, and it looks quite a technical based subject, so I'm going to be ploughing through that. But I think the one thing which I'm seeing this year in 2023, more than for the last 6 or 7 years with Micro Four Thirds, is the main manufacturers, OMD Systems and Panasonic Lumix, really putting some effort into sensor design. Olympus with a stacked sensor, and Lumix going into the 24 megapixel, the PDAF, and this hyperspherical sensors. I think that there's some really, really exciting times ahead in the Micro Four Thirds format, which will take the image quality to newer places that we haven't seen before. Let me know what you think. Give me a thumbs up on this video if you found it at least a bit useful. Thank you very much for watching. Leave us comments below. I love reading your comments. I really do love leaving your comments. But also, please, if you're not a subscriber, please hit the subscribe button. It is free. I'm getting up towards 7,500 subscribers. My aim is to hit 10,000 as soon as possible. So if you can help me there on that, I really would appreciate it. Now, before I go, there's a list here which you'll see that these wonderful people are patrons on my Patreon page, and they've helped financially support the channel. Really is appreciated to them. If you just want to do one-off support, there is a PayPal link below if you just like to leave me enough for a cup of coffee, and that helps the channel go. But I really do appreciate everybody who supports this channel. Until the next time though, this is Brian James, that Micro Four Thirds guy, saying keep on taking your camera out, keep on having fun with your photography. Bye bye.